Well, every now and then I accidentally leave a tie on when I get home. I just loosened it up, so it's a little bit of a leftover from my day job. So just ignore it. It's a Clark Kent look. Yeah, I got the S on underneath.
There you go. Show Bendis what Superman's supposed to look like. Aaron Viola says, "Hey, welcome back, DKN and Comic Boom. Missed you guys. Missed you too, man. It's pained me that school and work and all this, and obviously making a comic book, has taken me away from this. And I'm hoping to establish myself back in. But man, if you would see just all the books I'm reading for class, it's ridiculous. Like I have 4 books right over here on top of my little space heater. All of which I am reading for class, and it is nuts. Just for now. Like I think the class I'm in, when the semester's said and done, we will have read 14 novels by the end of the semester. So I'm learning how to write better, which is great. That's phenomenal. We're taking steps there. So
Well, that's good. And I never said live. I want to say live again. Congratulations on funding your Kickstarter, man.
Thanks, man.
That's fantastic. Congratulations, and so looking forward to it. And that's good. That's a hell of an accomplishment. And if I'm assuming you're already a good writer because you've already written one comic book. We just haven't seen it yet. So bigger and better.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, there are plenty of guys that write comic books that cannot write, especially seeing especially seeing some other guys in the indie space in the Kickstarter. I was just like, wow, okay, great.
Well, we're going to be talking about some bad writers tonight, so
we will be. That is a thing that is happening. Comic Breakdown says, "Hey yo, what's up, man? Thanks for popping in." The Comic Source, the respectable thing is not working for you. Boom. You need to get another look.
Oh well, next time. I actually got all my DC. What do you call it? DC fandom shirts. They came in finally, so I got to get the wife to iron them.
There you go. That's the move. Samoki Dude asks how the Kickstarter is going. It's over, man. It's done. We funded the book, and yeah, I don't know why you didn't get a copy, bro. You're gonna regret it when I'm the next Alan Moore, and then I wander off into my own cave somewhere, and you can't find me again. I can promise you that.
You'll have a better looking beard than Alan Moore, so don't worry about it.
I hope so. That would be really nice because I know my writing's not going to get that good. So, but just to kind of tease you, I'll show you guys a little thing from the book. It's cropped because of the way StreamYard's going to do it. But let's see if it pops up. Technology. And boom. Here's a double page splash from my picture book here. So hope you guys enjoy that. Hope for those of you that were phenomenal enough to back the campaign, I hope you guys enjoy what you see, and that this is rewarding to you, because it's sure as hell rewarding to me to put this thing up on the internet. So I think Comic Boom and the Comic Source saw this a little bit earlier. I sent them this in our little group chat, but I think Rocky's frozen here, which is certainly unfortunate. So we're gonna pop him out and hope he pops back in. Yeah, but this is one of the pages from my book, so I hope you guys enjoy what you see. We'll go through a couple of these live chats while Boom finds his way back in here. Nerdy Blurb TV says, "Hey, I assume that means what's up, y'all. Just listening while I edit dem vids. Well, thanks for popping by, brother. I appreciate it. I'm glad to see you. We're glad to hear from you. And thank you so much for the congratulations on the Kickstarter." Let's see. Paul Baker. I've missed a couple of shows, unfortunately, but I'm back. It's good to see you, Paul. Thanks for coming by. Fortunately for you, I haven't posted in like a month, so you haven't missed much. Good to see you all, Sister Helen 29. Good to see you too, man. Nerdy Blurb TV says, "Okie, you can still buy one. It is still up." Can you? Once the Kickstarter's over, can you still buy it? I didn't know that. Are you sure? I mean, you can check. Like, if you want to go into link in my bio, Samoki Dude, and click the Kickstarter link. I'm pretty sure that once it's done, it's done on Kickstarter. But let me know. I might be totally wrong. He says, Samoki Dude says, I hope it's better than some of the other stuff that's on Kickstarter. Yeah, I can promise you that. I mean, the art alone, I think, is better than most of what you're going to see on most independently funded platforms, if I do say so myself. The Comic Source says, can't wait to read the Kickstarter. Everything I've seen looks amazing. Thank you, man. I really, really appreciate that. And I very much think that everybody that picks up this book is going to be well rewarded on a couple of different levels. So, yeah, with that being said, I want to thank everybody for popping by, and I will intro up the show while we're waiting for Comic Boom to get in here. But hey guys, welcome to the 59th episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comics community discusses one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, constructs, or adaptations, we hit it all. This week, if he ever returns back from the dead, I am joined by the Canadian Cape Crusader himself, Comic Boom. Hopefully he finds his way back home. But today we're going to be kind of going over the state of DC Comics. And it's funny because we had talked about this before this whole DC Future State announcement came up. And well, now Future State's a thing. And we've been rejoined. Welcome back, my friend.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Just conked out here on my end again.
All good. Hopefully that's not a consistent thing. Well, fortunately, while you were gone, I already introed us up and introduced you as the Canadian comic book cultist. So that's out of the way. But as you get closer to the source of your Wi-Fi, I was just letting the folks know that we kind of decided to talk about the state of DC Comics as it comes out of the pandemic prior to the Future State announcement. And now that DC has come out with a significant amount of information regarding the initiative and what it's going to be looking like, I was like, well, how can we not talk about DC coming out of this pandemic without discussing more about Future State? And so the first question is, or the first thing that I think is worth bringing up, is what DC has been doing leading up into Future State. They've cut their line a hell of a lot. A lot of their ongoing series that were not selling super well, and a lot of and they were sort of not allocating any more time to shorter series. You know, Suicide Squad's gone, Hawkman's ending, and a number of other series. And it was getting to the point where I think I was talking to you and the Comic Source privately, saying that we were getting to the point where a couple months from now, you know, my DC pull was going to be maybe 3 books, you know, and that's including the upcoming Batman Black and White anthology. So what does that mean for DC? And now we know, well, they're doing some big line-wide publishing initiative called DC Future State, which I am cautiously optimistic about. And for those of you that are not aware of what DC Future State is, that's okay, because we've just now gotten most of the information today. And so, Comic Boom, I'm wondering, can you let the folks know at home the gist of what what DC Future State looks like it's going to be?
Well, what it looks like it's going to be is it's like the failed 5G experiment. They clearly took storylines that were left over from 5G, which is what I think Dan Didio maybe had planned at some point, but was ultimately rejected. But I think a lot of those storylines are in play. It does deal with a new generation of heroes. There's more legacy characters. It looks like from the solicits, there's another Wonder Woman. I think there's another Flash character. There's different iterations of different characters. And everything's in a significantly, everything's different. It's very interesting. It feels very, I think you mentioned it before when we were talking online about it. It almost looks like an iteration of Futures End a little bit. It looks like they're just throwing stuff at a wall to seeing what sticks. It's for 2 months. It's a 2-month wide event. It encompasses, I think Jason he counted them all. I think a total of 33 issues a month.
Oh boy. Well,
and I don't know if you can hear me, but
Yeah,
it seems like
you
it's
cut
going to
off
be
you cut off at 33 issues a month.
yeah. In any event, it looks like it's going to be dealing with the future iterations of DC characters. It's going to be dealing with new writers, a lot of new writers, new artists, a lot of fresh blood. That's what I like out of it. I don't know if
Hmm.
the stories are going to be all that great for a number of reasons, but I like the idea that we get new writers that hopefully bring some passion to the characters, and maybe we'll get something good out of it. I don't know. What do you think?
You know, that's the thing. I, like you, am cautiously optimistic. And I guess we'll start why as to why I'm not, and kind of end that segment on a good note. Um, why am I not? Why am I a little bit skeptical about this? One, because I get the sense that there might not be any sort of prolonged impact from this. It does feel like a bit of a stopgap in the way that you had mentioned with Future's End and Convergence. And it's unfortunate because even if this is good, you know, and it doesn't impact anything, it's ultimately a little bit of a disappointment. When Future's End was coming out, although the Future's End series was quite horrible, the one shots that that DC had used as a sort of stopgap to let their writers and artists get ahead on their monthly books, a lot of them were actually really good. We'd seen a world where sort of that underlying plot thread in Scott Snyder's Batman becomes more fully realized, where he sets up a system where a Batman version of him is cloned and rebirthed, every generation or so, and it talks about the necessity as to why we need a Batman. There was a brilliant what was it Hal Jordan as the White Lantern during Green Lanterns. There was so many great stories that we never got any sort of continuation on, and it felt like a complete and utter tease, and that certainly was a bit of a bummer. And I'm not going to say that I feel any sort of love for Convergence. Convergence was, I mean, just a waste of time, if we're going to be frank. Had a couple good series, but nothing really of particular note. And lastly, why I'm not as confident is just because I don't trust DC editorial right now. They are just under the palm of AT&T, but even really leading up to AT&T fully sort of actualizing their control on DC Comics, DC wasn't doing so hot. As apparent again by the fact that I just dropped a handful of DC books the other day, including Batman. Again, so I don't trust them to keep a very cohesive universe, or to really put the right talent on the books and let them do what they're best at doing. So that's sort of what scares me. And even just looking at the future state lineup, there are a number of creators that are really sharpshooters, that are really, really strong talents that aren't a part of this future state slate. And just to bring up something Jason said earlier, one of the comments I had shelved is he had mentioned a number of names that have not that have not been named on future state titles, that are perhaps maybe working on new monthly series as future state rolls out, which is a possibility. But there's a number of names that they brought in from television and a couple of other mediums that, again, makes me slightly skeptical as to how much they're really paying attention to whether or not their creators can properly utilize the tools that the medium gives them. And it's not always a bad thing, right? I mean, we've had plenty of guys and girls that have come from television, film, things like that have turned out to be spectacular and all-time great comic book writers. You get guys like J. Michael Straczynski. You get guys like Kevin Smith that's turned in a number of seminal runs on high-profile characters. So, that's again is a pretty hot and cold subject. Why I am optimistic in any regard towards DC Future State is because we need something fresh. We need something new. We need to stop rehashing the same old stories over and over and over again. And I understand that can become difficult when you obviously have to pay regards and respects to the continuities of the characters that you're dealing with. But what I like about DC Future State is the potential of shifting focus to a new generation. And if it's anything like 5G, or if it is eerily I would say, a replica of what 5G was going to be. It does kind of leave me a bit disappointed because I feel like there are countless generations of DC characters that we could have explored taking over the sort of primary superhero mantles. But nonetheless, I'm ready for something new. You know, I've been saying this now for a year. Bruce Wayne Batman is my favorite fictional character of all time. I'm ready to read somebody else's Batman. I am, because, you know, not to say that there aren't great Bruce Wayne stories to be done, but I am starting to get a sense that my favorite character and his brand is just being diluted by people continuously pumping out books with Batman Bruce Wayne, by people continually having entirely different visions on who this character is and why he does what he does, and it becomes convoluted, and it, you know, it starts to totally subtract from what makes the character special. So
So what do you think of the idea though of I think it's Dark Detective in the Future State comic series, Dark Detective. I think Bruce Wayne is in the background. I think then there's the new Batman, written by the next Batman written by John Ridley, the screenwriter John Ridley. It was probably Luke Fox. So what do you think of the Future State, the prospects of a future state Batman?
You know, I like I said, I love the idea of moving somewhere new, giving a lot of these other characters time to shine. Um, do I think that, you know, Luke Fox is the guy to take over after Bruce Wayne? No, I don't. Am I not going to give it? I mean, I'm going to give it a try. You know, it's John Ridley. Um, I think as long as it's done well, it can ultimately win me over. I think no matter what, I will always be skeptical of the fact that the second Batman is not going to be one of the more immediate members of the Bat family, just because I feel like a number of them have earned that status. But you know, who knows? It could be done well. I do like the fact that we can still have smaller Bruce Wayne stories sort of in the periphery, because there's, you know, I get it. You know, Bruce Wayne is a moneymaker. Batman is a moneymaker, but at the same time, you don't want to dilute the brand. And so I think maybe putting Bruce Wayne on the back burner for a little bit is a good way to generate some new fresh energy and some new fresh stories. So, you know, I'm actually, it's ironic because I was a massive critic of DC 5G and everything we had heard about it. And again, a lot of that could have just been speculation on behalf of the news sources that I follow. But from based on what I'm seeing from 5G, I again am pretty open to giving this a shot, regardless of whether or not I feel like there could have been better directions to take it in. I don't know, man. Like, what is your general consensus on what I was going to call it 5G, on what Future State seems to be doing to the DC universe?
Well, it's the next generation. They're just throwing stuff at a wall. They're just to see what works, and they're hoping something works. These are glorified Elseworld tales that are technically in the mainstream universe. If they work, they're going to bring them back. They can make these characters disappear in a timeline, and they can bring them back if they need to, if they catch on. I think the new Wonder Woman, that new sort of like I think that new African looking Wonder Woman or whatever, looks kind of cool.
She's Brazilian.
Oh, Brazilian, thank you. And there's a new Flash character that looks kind of interesting. I mean, so there's characters here that I think are going to probably stick, and so I'm curious that way. But I mean, let's be blunt here. In my personal opinion, the reason why I'm looking forward to Future State is that it's quite obvious that DC is not interested in developing the mainstream DC characters in intelligently. They're not capable of it. That's why we end up with Death Metal, which was I think an insult. It's a joke. It's not taking the universe seriously. It's not taking the characters seriously. It's trying to sell action figures. And don't get me wrong, I have fun with Death Metal for what it is, but it shouldn't quite be as serious as it is. And I feel there's been a dumbing down of the narrative, that this is no longer, at least I could tell myself we had the illusion of comic books are at their best when it's on the surface, it might be for younger readers, but it's adult storytelling that doesn't insult younger readers. That's what appeals to comic books. And I can't stand when I pick up a comic book and it's actually written like it's trying to cater to a 14-year-old. Like you look at Marika Tamaki's latest Wonder Woman, where which is just appallingly bad, where she's got Wonder Woman now teaming up with Max Lord to take down a fat 400-pound computer geek on a beach in the latest issue of Wonder Woman. It's just absolutely appalling. She's sort of like some comedian, and Maxwell Lord's like her straight man. It's just bad, just terrible writing, and it's written down to the average Wonder Woman reader. Be great for superhero girls, but we're not writing to preteens. But that's where unfortunately, that's what I fear AT&T is doing. And I, when I see Jen Bartel with the pink cover, pink frame, pink colored Wonder Woman issue for Future State. I mean, I love Jen Bartel. She's a great artist, but it's again, it all comes down to the storytelling. And I just want compelling storytelling. And I'm really hoping that we're going to get some great storytelling out of like Kennedy is that one writer. He's writing Last God.
Yep.
His last name's Kennedy. He's writing going to be War. What's that?
Yeah, it's Philip Kennedy Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So, thank you, Philip Kennedy Johnson. Yeah, and he's writing that War of the Worlds with Superman. I'm really looking forward to that. But
I mean, there are a couple books that I think are definitely pulling me in terms of, like, first of all, I think the design language of the covers are great. I know you don't love like the hot pink and the crazy sort of borders. I think it at the end of the day, the cover is meant to catch the eye of a potential buyer and to attract them to the book. And the sort of the graphic design language, I think, is actually really, really enticing. And I think it was Dan Mora that did a majority of the character designs. And I think even the character and costume designs look really good. Like, on an aesthetic level, DC Future State looks cool. And it does appeal to that sort of monkey brain side of me, the part of me that, just wants to enjoy something for what it is. Obviously the sort of hypercritical side will come out by the time these books hit the stands, and I'll have to review them. But on a surface level, this, as you guys can see on the screen, is actually really attractive in a way. Now, sort of getting an idea for what's going to be going on with these DC characters, I want to pull up pretty much what DC Comics is claiming the future to be. So in terms of in Gotham, the Batman family, quote from DC: "In the future, Gotham City is controlled by the Magistrate. This villainous regime has taken control of the city, now under constant surveillance. All masked vigilantes have been outlawed and Batman has been killed." Quote. But led by an all-new Batman, a new assembly of Gotham's Guardians rise to give hope to all those who lost it. And we'll be seeing oversized comics of Future State, the next Batman 1-4, which I believe will contain 5 anthology stories. The Next Batman by John Ridley and Nick Darrington, Outsiders by Brandon Thomas and Sumit Kumar, Arkham Knights by Paul Jenkins and Jack Herbert, Batgirls by Vita Ayala and Aneke, Gotham City Sirens by Paula Svenbergen and Emanuela Lupacchino. We will also see the Future State Dark Detective, which is led by the Dark Detective story with Comic Boom's favorite Wonder Woman writer, Mariko Tamaki, and Dan Mora. Grifters by Matthew Rosenberg and Carmine DiGomenico, and Red Hood by Joshua Williamson and Giannis Milogiannis. And then we'll see a couple of monthly miniseries, a Batman Superman book by Gene Luen Yang and Ben Oliver, which actually really excites me. I've been ready for Gene Luen Yang to get another chance at mainline DC. I think he's a great writer. I think he carries with him a lot of passion and care for these characters. And I think this series is going to be one to look out for. And clearly with art by Ben Oliver, I think this is going to be interesting. We're going to get a Future State Catwoman title by Ram V and Otto Schmidt, Future State Harley Quinn by Stephanie Phillips and Simone DeMeo, Nightwing by Andrew Constant and Nicola Scott, Robin Eternal by Megan Fitzmartin and Eddie Barrows. Whoa! I did not see Eddie Barrows' name the first time I read through this article, and that gets me kind of excited. So I'm curious, just looking over the scope of the Batman titles and what we're given here and the obvious character designs we've seen so far. This is a question for obviously Comic Boom, but also everybody watching us now. What are you guys thinking? Do you guys think that the direction of Gotham seems like a positive one? Do you think it's going to be intriguing? Do the creative teams on these books get you excited at all? And why or why not? Boom. What are your thoughts? And are there any of these stories that really seem to catch your eye or that scare you a little bit?
N- uh, truthfully, nothing really catches my eye. I know it's just going to be for 2 months, but I do like Stephanie Phillips. She's going to be writing Harley Quinn. I enjoyed her. She has written Artemis for Aftershock, and she's also written A Man Among Ye. So she's a up and coming writer, and I've enjoyed it. She's not I won't say she's super great, but she's got a lot of potential, and I think she keeps getting better. And so I'm looking forward to that. I like I like Gotham City once again being in some state of chaos. It's that's been done before, but at the same time, I like Gotham City Sirens. It's rather curious that Harley Quinn is not a member of Gotham City Sirens. That sort of stood out to me. But I'm curious about that. I'm also curious about the new Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman is wearing a Batman utility belt, and she's also wearing a Green Lantern ring or necklace. She's on around her neck. So that future state Diana is interesting. She seems to be wearing symbols from Green Lantern and Batman, and I'm wondering if maybe she's got symbols from other heroes. So definitely for a 2-month event, I'm in. I'm excited that so much. If we can get a really good story in 2 months, I'd like that, because I hate when it drags out for a year. Like I hate You're the Villain. It took us a year and a half, 2 years. At least the good thing is that if this really hits, it's 2 months. We'll have like 33 issues a month, 66 issues if you want all of it. But you don't need to do that. You could probably just collect the series you know and love, whichever. It reminds me a little bit like Flashpoint, where you had your different series and different characters a little bit. That's what I'm hoping. I mean, worst case scenario, it's going to be Convergence. Best case scenario, it might be a Flashpoint, right? We'll see what happens.
That's true. How much weight do you think Future State is going to carry for DC, post this event? Or do you think that DC is literally at the point where they're not as concerned about the planning long term, and they're going to wait to see what the pre-order success of these books are?
Yeah, I think they got nothing to lose. I think this is them throwing a challenge to these new writers, in particular writers like Stephanie Phillips, who is getting her big break with one of the big two. I mean, saying, look, guys, this is 2 months. You got 2 months to shine. Show us what you got. And if we like it, then you'll join the ranks of Venditti and the rest of the crew and Snyder, who are planning the next line of DC after the 2-month mark. Clearly, DC is going to be going back to something else. So this is what you and I have talked about this. We love writers that are passionate, and this is their moment to shine. Show us what you got. You know what? Even if forget about what any of us say, just give it your best. Go big or go home. Just don't be afraid to. Sky's the limit. Have fun. This is a 2-month event, because no matter how outrageous the storyline, if we like it and we love it, it's going to become mainstream. Doesn't matter how Elseworlds it is. It doesn't matter how crazy it is. If there's a character or a storyline we love, it's going to somehow find a way to continue to exist in its own continuity moving forward.
Yeah, you make a good point. And I think with that being said, before we move on to what seems to be the next sort of move for DC Future State regarding like the Superman family, I want to get into a couple of these comments here. Paul Baker says, still no idea why in story they decided to go with Luke as Bruce's successor when Cassandra was right there. I'm excited to see what they do with him, but the decision does feel a little bit jarring. I can 100% guarantee you, Paul Baker, that the reason this is done is because John Ridley wanted to do it, and I think he wanted to tell a focally black cultural narrative with Batman. He was poised to do the other history of the DC universe, which is the history of African American characters in the DC universe in a more adult context. As far as I understand, this is what his Black Label Batman was going to be, right? Because at one point, didn't they start soliciting his Luke Fox Batman as a Black Label when they were going to completely scrap 5G?
Yeah, I believe you're right. Well,
Because
first, yeah, you're
because
right.
this Ben Oliver cover right here, I'm pretty sure was the one they were using to solicit it.
Yeah, I believe you're right. Well, first his run was gonna start. John Ridley's run was gonna start at issue 101 or 100 of Batman, and then it became a Black Label series, and now it's become the next Batman, I guess. And you know, I think it's a good thing. You know, give him 2 months to show this new Luke Fox character, see what he's got, and like if he catches on, I'm sure they're going to continue to use him. And to me, this is a big test case for DC. AT&T, the powers that be, Marie Javins, the new head of DC editorial. I mean, she's really promoting this. I think a lot more is riding on this. I think this is more than just a 2-month break for the. This is more than just a convergence break. That This is going to be definitely. They're testing some waters here. They're testing some waters, and just to answer the question about Cassandra Cain versus Luke Fox, you know, why didn't they go with Cassandra versus maybe the Black character? I mean, Cassandra's an Asian character. Both are diverse. I love Cassandra Cain. She's my favorite DC Universe character. The fact of the matter is, real world politics is always going to trump DC continuity.
Well, I think a big part of it too is that obviously, you know, John Ridley wanted to tell a character with somebody that I think he could more identify with, right? Like a Black Batman. And with his status, I don't think DC was going to say no. And with that being said, you know, we're obviously talking about the sort of recycling of ideas. How much of what's happening here do you think is just going to be, you know, a complete sort of, okay, let me restart the sentence or this question. Do you think this is exactly what DC 5G had in store, or do you think they retooled it during the off months of the coronavirus?
Well, okay, obviously I'm only speculating at this point, but to be honest with you, something had to have been bad enough to get Dan Didio fired, and I actually think this is probably very close to what 5G was, and probably maybe that's why it got Dan Didio fired. I don't know, but let me tell you something. If this is a big success, if Future State is a big success, then maybe they might be relooking at second guessing why they fired Dan Didio. But again, that's just speculation on my part. I could be wrong.
It could be. Could be.
What do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it in a private chat with you and Jace from the Comic Source, but I do think that this shows the bones of what 5G was going to be, perhaps reworked and retooled to accommodate the harsh criticism that a number of people were giving it online. You know, like we mentioned it before in numerous live streams that DC had like 2 months just about of nothing getting shipped out. And so it certainly in comic book time gives them some serious sort of momentum to pivot and retool. So to me, I think they've actually done a fairly successful job at taking the bones of what 5G was going to be and repackaging it into something that I think seems far more attractive than what we had been given, right? Like, so I don't know. That's just me. I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks, though. I know Tevye is reiterating your sentiments about Cassandra Cain. He's hoping we get to see more of her and Stephanie Brown becoming Batgirl permanently. I would love to see Cassandra Cain take a more prominent role in the Bat family. I think she's a brilliant character with a lot of really, really solid sort of relatability to her. And man, I would, and especially just through doing the show and talking to you guys and boom, I would love to get a crack at writing Cassandra Cain. I would love to bring her back into prominence because, again, I just think she's so versatile. And I think a lot of her sort of backstory echoes a lot of trauma in ways that I just want to see more of her interacting with the family and with Bruce. You know, to me, she is Bruce's first real sort of daughter figure. You know, to me, he was always sort of the uncle to Barbara Gordon, but I think Cassandra Cain was always his chance to be more of a father to a young girl, and I think the fact that we've sort of lost that in the space of the New 52 and Rebirth is definitely a shame. You know, even as much as I did end up liking James Tynion's Detective Comics run, I hated those moments where we found out that Cassandra Cain was like sleeping in the rafters of a performance hall. I was like, no, it's like Batman wouldn't do that. Like Bruce Wayne wouldn't. Hell, Alfred wouldn't let Bruce, even if he was being that sort of willfully ignorant about it. So, you know, she's a great character. She deserves more time in the spotlight. And so I'm hoping, by virtue of the fact that as part of their press release, DC released new character designs for Cassandra Cain, I'm really hoping that we'll be seeing more of her.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Cassandra Cain's a great character. I like her redesign and her teaming up with Stephanie Brown is. I'm not a huge Stephanie Brown fan, but I can live with that. I just want Cassandra Cain back in all her glory. She's such a compelling character, and it's good to see her in DC Future State. Moving forward, it's really curious to speculate what's going to happen after DC Future State, because what we all have to bear in mind is DC's already decided what's coming after DC Future State, because obviously we're assuming they got guys like Robert Venditti and Snyder, who's maybe are working on some things post Future State, and it's going to be curious to see what those things are, and because just like the comment you put up with Chase earlier about Castelluni and
Venditti
and all those
Jurgens.
other, yeah. And
yeah, no, it is
even Tom Taylor. You know, I mean, what are they working on post Future State? That's the real question.
And that's the thing, man. There is that absence of DC's A-list talent that is making this feel more and more like a stopgap. You know, in my mind, there's no way they let their B and C list writers and all these other people coming in from other mediums define the publishing line. There's absolutely no way. I mean, John Ridley is obviously an A-list writer, but he's not here to stay. You're not going to get someone like John Ridley to do a monthly series. No way. I mean, first of all, he's making pennies writing a Batman comic book compared to writing the film and television. So that's the thing that makes me a little bit skeptical, is that, you know, even if I do like this direction they're going in, it makes me feel like it's going to be kind of inconsequential, because again, all their A-list writers, you know, are absent of this slate. Tynan, King, Snyder, Venditti, Tomasi, you know, so I don't know if I said Taylor, but Taylor, obviously. So it's a little bit disheartening. I don't know. I'm in, honestly, such a state of flux, because I like some of the ideas that are presented here, and I think there's a chance that I end up enjoying them in execution. But I'm also skeptical of DC's potential execution because of what they've done as of late. I'm also skeptical of the fact that I might like this and it being inconsequential. But again, all of this sort of artwork that we're seeing from these looks great. These look phenomenal. And again, I am a big fan of the design language for everything. But Mark McKeever says, I have no interest in all. I'll be saving a lot of money. The Swamp Thing cover is awesome, though. Swamp Thing cover is really cool. I am a fan of a majority of these covers. I don't know, to be honest with you, considering I was at a position where come January, February, I was gonna be almost completely absent of DC titles. This has piqued my interest enough for me to give a more than a handful of these books a shot. So I'm in a slightly different camp from you, Mark. I mean, first of all, I don't even need to ask Comic Boom, because I know Comic Boom is going to buy a bunch of these things. One, as a speculator, and two, as somebody who just is way too addicted to his comic books to not give it a shot.
Yeah, you know me too well. Yes. I will say this. I'm even interested, if you can believe this, over the next 2 months, what's also going to be very interesting, I think, is looking at what Superman, the Future State Superman, Future State Legion of Superheroes. Now, you look at the Bendis titles. Now, Bendis, one of the things that I think, I mean, obviously we've complained about Bendis before, but what's great about the Bendis Superman stories that he's got to wrap them up, because he's gone in December. He's got to wrap those suckers up. And so he's got it. Normally, it takes him 36 issues to tell a simple concept story. He's got to wrap up his Superman in 2 months,
Mm.
and and uh, and I find it interesting that on his Legion of Superheroes future state, he's teamed up with artist Riley Rosmo, who arguably is probably the second worst artist that DC has, next to John Romita Jr. And I don't know. I just get a sense that DC just is, I think DC editorial doesn't like Bendis either, because they just don't seem to be giving him great artists. Other than on Superman, he has gotten Ivan Reis on Superman. So I guess it's not a complete write-off for him. But the future state story of Superman appears to be, I got to admit, I'm kind of curious. Superman being banished off Earth, likely because flowing out of Bendis's current storyline. So I think it's a fairly predictable storyline if you've been reading Bendis's Superman. Why Superman gets kicked off Earth, because he proclaimed himself king of the Earth. He ends up on War World. Meanwhile, his son John Kent's on Earth, and he bottles up the city of Metropolis. Sounds like a ridiculous Silver Age like storyline, which frankly, you might as well deal with it in 2 months' time, and deal with it, finish it, get it done, and let's move on to a new Superman come January.
You make an interesting point. And Aaron VO says that Robin Eternal has definitely grabbed his interest, to be honest. He's not super familiar with a lot of these authors and artists. Trust me, a lot of us aren't with at least half of these names here. Let's see. He will say that the thought of having stories of Batman having been killed kind of turns him off. But that's probably him just being an old man resistant to accepting change. Here's the cover for that Robin Eternal book there. But in this dark detective title, it's actually revealed that Bruce Wayne is not dead. This is the main man, Bruce Wayne, headlining this title. So he's not dead. I think he is supposedly dead to his allies, comrades, enemies, and such. But it seems to me that he'll be working sort of underground as Batman, dealing with the supposed trauma of, I'm assuming, either almost being killed or to whatever is forcing him to pull this sort of Dark Knight Returns-esque faking of his death. So we'll see. Mark McKeever says that he feels like this is a 2-month filler. It'll be a big investment for comic book retailers. That is an interesting point. But I think that even then, I think comic book retailers are going to be rewarded. We're getting a bunch of number ones, a bunch of cool, flashy titles. I think that these books are really going to appeal to the speculator market big time, because we're going to be seeing a lot of first appearances, of new characters, but also a lot of first appearances of old characters in entirely different mantles, right? So it's time will tell, but I actually do think that the ROI for comic book retailers are actually going to be a net positive because of this. So we will see.
They are oversized, right? They're oversized, and yeah. I think what's the price point? Do you know what the price point is on them?
I don't know. I mean, if they're oversized issues, I assume they're going to be anywhere from like $6 to $8. Unless they feel like pulling a Rebirth and actually, letting us pay what the books are worth. But we'll see. I honestly have no idea. I'll have to ask my retailer when I see him tomorrow, see if he has any news on that, because I believe solicitations are also coming out tomorrow. The full solicitations for these books. So that should with them come prices. Let's see. Mark McKeever also says, sorry, but I rolled my eyes with DC using the same Mongol War World storyline yet again in the Superman Clark Kent offering. I don't hate it. Mostly because I've yet to see very many Superman War World comics that are actually good. I feel like I give a writer a lot of leeway to retool sort of old concepts or old stories if they're going to do it well, especially considering I think most of the previous at-bats to this concept have been, well, not good. So I'm pretty open to it. And again, I am in the same boat as Boom in terms of the excitement for Philip Kennedy Johnson getting a stab at Superman. I think he's a solid writer. He's up and coming. I think he's hungry. And I think giving him the opportunity to tell a story with, one of DC's headlining characters is an overwhelmingly net positive alongside, art by Mikel Janin. I think it has some serious upward mobility in the minds and hearts of comic book fans. I don't know. What do you think, Boom?
Yeah, I agree with you. Philip Kennedy Johnson. I love him. His Last Gods is great. I think he's underrated as a writer. He deserves more status. But of course, his comic books don't seem to sell a lot. Unfortunately, he's one of those writers who just, he writes a lot of comics, but they don't always sell very well. But then you could probably say the same about Robert Venditti too, quite frankly. So, and also in terms of Mongol is a character. I mean, people forget that Bendis actually killed Mongol off. Mongol's son is now Mongol, and one of the most famous Superman storylines of all time is the Mongol Warworld storyline. I hope they do something different with that. I hope they have a fresh take on it, because I think we're due for a fresh take and maybe a new generation to appreciate just how cool Mongol is and how badass he is, because he was pretty badass in the pages of Green Lantern, and now that his son's taken over, it'd be interesting to see what different things he brings to the table. But, under Bendis's scripts, I don't know if it'll be that great, but Philip Kennedy Johnson is writing, I think, War of the Worlds, he's calling it. So I'm not sure where the overlap is there, or who's, I think it's all Philip Kennedy Johnson, isn't it? Or is Bendis writing anything? I'm not really.
Bendis is just doing Legion.
Right. Good.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Again, I am suspicious of the potential sort of implications this is going to have for the future of DC, just because, again, they're putting a lot of their B and C list writers, and as much as I like some of these names and I like some of their work, they're not hot. They're not hot names that sell books, and with the absence of all of their I would say A and upper B list creators, it does make me feel like this is just, again, that sort of stopgap to allow them to get ahead on whatever the new direction of the DC universe is that they've likely planned over the last couple months while distribution is slowed down. So we'll see. Paul Baker says, I don't know who he's calling Buddy, but somebody is his buddy. Buddy, they're not even called Batgirl in their story that's literally titled Batgirls. We can say goodbye to any prayer of them taking it up in the current continuity, but I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. The status of the Batgirl / Batgirls is going to be pretty nebulous. But what Paul Baker says next, I think, is interesting, because we've listed a couple of DC's big writers who are not on this future state ticket, including Mark Waid, who has been all but confirmed to be coming back to DC for a Superman related title. And so I wonder, what he's going to be cooking up post future state. And again, it just seems so cloudy. I just have no idea what could be happening here. What future state is really going to be doing for the DC universe.
Yeah. Mark Waid. Well, frankly, I love the idea of Mark Waid to, give Mark Waid some power, let him work his magic, because the guy, DC's in now. I just have a lot of faith in Mark Waid. Maybe it's misplaced. I know that he's been he might end up like Bendis. Who knows? Bendis was supposed to be better than even I didn't think Bendis was going to be as bad as he ended up being. Mark Waid, though, he has a lot of passion for Superman. Superman is the North Star of the DC universe, flowing out of Doomsday Clock. Mark Waid, man, I think he's got an understanding of the Flash mythologies and Superman mythologies like no one else. And man, I don't know what the future plan would be, but Mark Waid is somebody he's a controversial figure. He's you could say he was an SJW, and maybe he's more liberal than anything else, but he's also been burned a lot. He's had a lot of experience. He's written everything. The guy's written everything under the sun, and he knows his DC. He might just be what we need right now. A return maybe to the hope and the essence of what DC's about. Because Mark Waid always said that he will never come back to see DC as long as Dan Didio is there. And with Dan Didio being gone, man, open up the pearly gates and let Mark Waid come flying in, and hope maybe this will be a heaven that we haven't appreciated. And maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, but I hope I'm not.
It's gonna be interesting, man, because again, time will tell. I'm not super comfortable making many predictions as to where this will go, which is weird because I feel like I'm usually pretty open to at least sort of speculating, but it's so hard to tell because I don't know. My better judgment again tells me that they've just taken all the ideas of 5G, reworked them a little bit, condensed them down to these 2 months so that they can, you know, not waste the money that they've already spent having these creators develop these ideas and use this as a time to publish in the way that Future's End sort of stopgap month did and the 2 months of Convergence did to allow their Tomasis, their Vendittis, their Snyders, their Tynans, their Wades, their Tom Taylors to develop whatever new series they have coming forward. So I don't know. I have no idea how to feel because it's like on one hand, I didn't love the sort of early conjecture about 5G. And if this in fact turns out just to be that reskinned, I will probably be glad that this will be over in 2 months. On the other hand, some of these ideas seem really interesting and they seem like very fresh and invigorating sort of directions to move these characters into. So it's like, what happens if this does confirm my suspicion and it just becomes something that I like with no sort of, bearing on what happens next? I don't know, man. It's a weird time.
Come on. Fucking cunt.
You good there, bud?
Yeah, I gotta move into another my phone's gonna die here.
Gotcha.
So I just gotta plug it in.
But yeah, I think we did actually just get a StreamYard contribution. So let me pop that up here real quick while you figure out what's going on with your charger. Let's see. Chrome tab. Bow. Okay. So from the ever illustrious Aaron VO says, stoked to see my dudes back at it. We are stoked to be back, I think. At least I am. It's good to be back, although I can feel myself slowly shedding off the rust. But thank you for joining us for our epic comeback, and I hope everybody's been enjoying the show so far. Let's see here. So I think we can sort of move on into some of the other titles that seem to be coming out. So we talked a little bit about the Future State Superman Worlds of War, but we also have a Future State Superman of Metropolis featuring Jonathan Kent as Superman. And with that comes a couple of anthology stories, including The Guardian by Sean Lewis and Cully Hamner, and Mr. Miracle by Brandon Easton and Valentin Delandro, which I can only assume is them trying to capitalize on the still sort of slow burning success of Tom King and Mitch Garrett's Mr. Miracle. I don't know really how I feel about the Superman of Metropolis with John Kent. I have a feeling that the Superman of Metropolis is going to be one of those ones that I might not try at first glance, but we'll see. I don't know. Like, is the main story or any of the sort of ancillary anthology stories tickling anybody? Like, is anybody feeling interested in it?
Yeah, I can speak for myself, obviously, when I say that the most ridiculous storyline is definitely the John Kent. I mean, shrinking Metropolis because he doesn't want Metropolis to end up like Gotham City with the magistrate, so he shrinks Metropolis, and then it upsets Supergirl, who I imagine it would, because I mean she's got memories of the bottle city of Kandor and Brainiac and all that nonsense, but it just seems like just a really dumb storyline. Just dumb, and it just doesn't interest me at all, quite frankly, that in that aspect of it. But you know, like I'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe it'll be good. I'm more excited about Superman and Wonder Woman. Uh,
Mm.
there's a Superman Wonder Woman title coming out, or one shot. What the future state of Wonder Woman and the new Brazilian Wonder Woman. I think those are ones that are really going to stay. I'm really excited about that. And I'm really interested and curious to know about why is Wonder Woman wearing a Batman utility belt and a ring of Green Lantern around her neck. I think that intrigues me more than anything, quite frankly.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. A lot of the little nuggets that they've included in the promotional art that is leaving a lot of longtime DC fans questioning what's going on. I mean, so if you had to pick three of these stories that interest you most, and maybe three that you are the least interested in, what would you say they'd be?
Oh man, that's tough because I have to recall everything that was said, and I had them all written down. But well, I would say I'm a Wonder Woman fan, so my high hopes for Wonder Woman, followed by War of the Worlds, Philip Kennedy Johnson, and the third I would probably go with I'll go with Tales of the Green Lantern Corps there. You know,
Hmm.
I looked, that's kind of a wild card, but I'll hope for the best on that. We'll see what happens. And
Yeah.
as far as, I don't know, what are your three most favorite?
Mm, see, the hard thing to tell is that I have no idea who the hell the writers are for those two Green Lantern stories. Like
Yeah. Well, no,
I've
neither do I. That's why I'm saying it's a wild card pick.
I've never even heard of them. So based on the sort of premise and who is writing them, I would say I gotta say the next Batman by John Ridley. Although I've been very vocal in how much I disagree with the choice of making Luke Fox the next Batman, it's John frickin' Ridley, and I think that it's very clear that the fact that this story has been a sort of passion project of his for more than a year now tells me that he put a lot into this. Now I am a little bit kind of shaky on it because I think you're going to get two very different vibes from this book, strictly because the exterior cover art is Ben Oliver and the interiors are Nick Darrington, who are two totally different artists stylistically and in the visual language that they sort of portray. You know, with the Ben Oliver covers, they're sort of illustrative realism esque, and they give this sense of this very dark, gritty, on the streets Batman story. But when you read Nick Darrington, I can't think of I can't follow that same sort of tonal train of thought. You know, when I think Nick Darrington, I think Doom Patrol. I think his crazy Silver Age Batman universe thing with Bendis. So that as much as I do trust Nick Darrington as a storyteller, I'm not sure if tonally his art is going to match what's going to be going on in the script. Although I am excited for it for sure. I would say my number two's got to be that Superman Worlds of War by Philip Kennedy Johnson and Mikel Janin. I trust Johnson. I think the premise is interesting. Mikel Janin on art is an absolute spectacle, and my number three might have to be that Immortal Wonder Woman by Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad and Jen Bartel. I trust Becky Cloonan as a storyteller. I think just all the little nuggets that we're seeing around her and this character and this Wonder Woman are going to be super interesting between the utility belt and the Green Lantern ring necklace worn around her. There are too many things in there not to kind of get me excited and questioning what's going to happen. But I would say, as a couple of honorable mentions, I am interested in The Dark Detective, although I am a little bit weary of Mariko Tamaki. It has frickin' Dan Mora on a futuristic Batman book, and that gets me excited. Let me tell you how close I was to picking up Batman Beyond for a couple random issues again while Dan Mora was on that title. I've been saying I want Dan Mora on a Batman or future sort of Batman title for a long time, and the sort of context behind what's going to be happening to Bruce Wayne is an interesting scenario. So I'd give that an honorable mention.
Yeah.
And also, Grifters by Matthew Rosenberg. I think Matthew Rosenberg is an immensely underrated writer currently in the comic book sphere. And kind of smashing in that Wildstorm property into Gotham City, I think is going to be a really, really interesting prospect. And I think Carmine Di Giandomenico is going to do a really good job in this sort of neo Gotham landscape. So it's exciting. It's just hard. I just don't really know how to feel about all of this because it just feels so ephemeral. It feels like it's not actually going to impact anything, and that this is just us, biding our time until DC's big guns figure out what the hell they're going to do. So it's hard to tell.
But let me ask you this. I think that I look forward more to the excitement of the unknown of Future State than I am currently in Death Metal. I'm already past Death Metal and it's not even over yet. I just don't even care how it ends because it's Batman who laughs, who can never be beaten. It's Batman who laughs, who's brilliant. He's a genius. He can rig the Mobius chair to do whatever he wants, and he's all knowing. He's all everything, and it's just the writing has gotten just. Again, it's just been such a joke. Death Metal. It's become its own meme of sad ongoing jokes, and the Batman who laughs. I'm so sick of him. You can call him Blackest Night, Darkest Night, call him what you want. It's the same crap, different pile. I'm in Future State already because my current state is going crazy.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. I mean, I have been so disenfranchised with DC, and anybody that's followed me knows this in any capacity. So it's going to be interesting, and specifically to what leads me to this sort of uncertainty about DC is that even in DC's own write-up here, it says that in DC Future State, the multiverse has been saved from the brink of destruction, but the triumph of DC's heroes has shaken loose the very fabric of space and time. First of all, it just sounds like we're going to be left in a very similar situation to how the original Metal left us, right? They shattered the boundaries of space and time and unleashed an overwhelming evil or darkness, whatever. Okay. The final chapter of Dark Knight's Death Metal, on sale, blah, 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 January, brings new life to DC's multiverse. And this is the kicker. Kicking off this glimpse into the unwritten worlds of DC's future, which leads me to feel like these unwritten worlds will never be, in quote, written or consequential or impactful on DC Comics, and that perhaps whatever is popular may get an Elseworlds or Black Label or whatever the hell they're going to call it after this treatment. Yeah. So I don't know. Like I said, some of this stuff definitely interests me. I'll be giving some of them a shot, but I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I think that I'm going to give a bunch of these books a try and pull the trigger on dropping a bunch of them immediately after I read them. So we'll see. Grayson Red says the only reason everybody lost their shit and got mad is because of the idea that Batman is black. It's all temporary, so it's not a big deal. I think that's certainly one of the biggest reasons, Grayson. But I think a lot of us were upset at the fact that we're getting a lot of legacy characters that were never given time to be developed into these mantles. That was certainly what frustrated me. I'm willing to give Luke Fox's Batman a try and all these other characters a try under, these iconic mantles, but they have to be developed and it has to be organic and well written. And I think that's what people were sort of scared about, is just that with the trajectory DC was going in at the time, is that they were not developing a lot of these characters before they just let these writers smack them into stories for royalties. And we're seeing that big time. We're seeing that in the current Batman title with all of these crazy Batman villains that are going to be, for the most part, one and dones, or are just in there to be cool and new and fresh and to up the spectacle value. And we saw that we've seen it with Bendis since he came to DC. Ginny Hex, Sinmar, Trash Can Doomsday, whatever the hell his name is. The Teen Lantern, the Golden Lantern, or whatever the hell that was. It's just, so while I get where you're coming from, Grayson, and I do agree with you to an extent, there are I'm sure a number of comic book fans that were just butthurt that Batman was black. I do also think that there are a fair amount of us that were just upset with the fact that DC was trying to shepherd in something without providing any guidance for this particular something. But I get your sentiment, man, 100%. Paul Baker says the Batman Group editor said in an interview that for the Gotham books, at least, this is the future that they're hoping they get to. Apparently, they've been planting these seeds for a while. I mean, yeah, they have been since pretty much Tynion hopped on to Batman, but you never really know because they were planning on doing 5G, and clearly, whatever 5G was going to be is not 100% what it is now, and what it is now is DC Future State. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
uh,
I would add to that the comment by the Batman Group editor there is another reason why if you're ever going to indulge in comic book speculation, it's probably a good idea to make some purchases for Future State, because there's no doubt whatsoever that some of those characters are going to be very popular. Some will pass by the wayside and not be popular at all. And you just don't know. Sometimes the most unpopular or the most innocuous character can rise to the ranks and be the tomorrow's next pop culture icon. So, it's definitely something that's why, I think why we're both cautiously optimistic about Future State. And the reality is this, that I think DC knows that you got to organically develop characters. I mean, Marvel found out the hard way in 2017 that you can't just change the gender of a character. You can't just change a legacy character overnight and expect people to just love it and embrace it and then turn around and accuse them of being racist and bigots. That doesn't fly, especially in today's pop culture climate. And
well, I mean, that's kind of what they're doing, right? Like we're literally gonna go from 1 month having Bruce Wayne, Batman, Clark Kent, Superman, and Diana Prince, Wonder Woman to these other characters. So have they
with
really?
a caveat though, with one caveat though, Dark Knight, and the caveat being that it's Future State, and so we'll have it for 2 months, and then we'll have all the years following the next 2 months to organically grow and lead into those characters and develop them. So I think DC might be trying to capture the best of both worlds,
Sure,
but cheat a little bit, just give a window into the future, but then step back and then develop toward it.
Sure, but doesn't that sort of pigeonhole you though? You're like, hey, this is going to happen in X amount of time. Therefore, any sort of stakes you might be building in any one of these stories that might imply that not happening, we know are senseless. So I think that it just ends up depriving the storytelling of all of its potential, to be quite honest with you. So I really don't know. I don't know how to feel about DC. They've done as comic book marketing has done for several years, and they've taken my waning interest and kept me on for at least another 2 months, which is like all that the comic book industry has really been successful in doing. They're like, hey, we know you're totally disinterested, so let's like release a bunch of these cool new covers and number ones and new designs and all this stuff. If this just turns out to be something totally sort of ineffectual to the future of DC Comics, I will openly admit I got duped. But this is kind of what it's starting to feel like to me, and it's interesting because at the start of this conversation, I was honestly pretty excited for this. And the more that I've actually gotten to verbalize myself, I'm like, oh boy, I'm kind of scared. So, we'll see. It's an interesting time. And again, I don't 100% know how to feel. And I do want to give these stories and these new sort of narratives a chance. But my confidence in DC has not been very high these I would say almost these last 2 years, for the most part. So we will see. Tehillim29 says Teen Lantern would have been better if Gleason got to write her character, seeing as it's his creation. I mean, isn't it also Bendis's creation? They were both on the book at the same time. Like Bendis was writing it and Gleason was drawing it. So I can't help but feel like it's also Bendis's character. I mean, I mean, maybe there's something I'm missing, but this seems like a pretty
Well, I think what he's getting at, I think that Tehillim is once again just like we both routinely rarely express any faith in Bendis. And so I would rather have had Gleason write Teen Lantern in Young Justice myself. I think
Sure.
we would have gotten more for the character. So, you know.
I mean, I'd rather her just not exist. So I don't care who created her. We don't need her. We have 12 other Earth Green Lanterns that are all infinitely more interesting than her. So I don't care who writes her because I just don't care about her. We got and the worst part is when it comes to the Green Lanterns, a little bit of a rant, man. All of the pre-existing Earth Green Lanterns that we've had are all interesting. You know how many of them just don't get their due? All of them except for Hal Jordan. It's true. And I love Hal. Hal's my favorite Green Lantern. But I'm so tired of every time DC introducing a new Green Lantern to be like, from Earth, from Earth, from Earth, from. I'm just so over it. Let's spend time with the characters that we have. I like, and to be frank, like if we're sitting here like cherry picking, why would I have Teen Lantern when I can go read like Joe Moline, you know, the Green Lantern from Far Sector, infinitely better, or I have Simon Baz or Jessica Cruz or John Stewart or Guy or Kyle. Like, I just don't care. I don't, you know, and continuously adding more Green Lanterns is just going to make me care less because you know what you're going to do? You're just going to ignore him for Hal Jordan anyways. So what does it matter?
Well, you know, I'll say this, that one of the things that I'm excited about with this future state is, and I'll, you know, and leading out of what you're talking about in terms of, you know, the Green Lanterns and character development in general, I think of Far Sector, the new Green Lantern in Far Sector. She's had like 7 or 8 issues out so far. And we actually learned she's an interesting character. We learn a lot about her in 7 or 8 issues. And what I love about this new creative teams are going to do, they've got 2 months to shine and to develop these characters as much as they can. And you and I both know that some of the best classic stories might only be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 issues long. And yet we feel that the characters, that we know them after a relatively short reading time. And that to me is the art of comic book writing. That's when the true talent really rises to the top. Not like when you have, and I hate to pick on Bendis, but you know, 3 years worth of Superman stories, and we still don't. And Rogolzar is a one-dimensional character. 2 issues into Sinmar, and we still don't know much about him. I mean, it goes on and on and on with all the characters that he develops, from the Invisible Mafia to Melody Moore, the fire chief who dies and nobody cares she's dead because we never got to know her anyway. I mean, this is what I mean. Like, you've said this before. That, you know, I mean, Bendis is not a star. He's not an A-lister. He doesn't write like an A-lister. He shouldn't be considered one. And this is the time for these new creative teams to shine, and they can do it. We can get a story where the characters feel organically developed. It doesn't have to take 36 issues. It can be done. And I hope some of these writers rise to the challenge.
Yeah, it's just, it's so hard to tell what's going on, and it's so hard, honestly. And I think it's a shame that DC has sort of conditioned me to be skeptical of my own excitement. You know, I wish I could just be excited for DC Comics, and I'm just not. And that's a bit of a bummer. And yeah, you know, so I'm thinking we're about an hour and 15 minutes. I'd like to wrap up in the next 15 minutes to keep this at a decent time. And I'll interject to say, all 10 of you that are watching this, do me a favor and like the video and subscribe. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Now that we've gotten the shameless plug out of the way and the zooming into my face.
Now that you've scared the hell out of him with a close up on your face. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, God damn, this guy's mustache is worse than I thought it was. So yeah, make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel if you've been enjoying this conversation. And I'd like to sort of conclude everything and wrap up the sort of totality of everything going on. And walking out of this conversation, one, is everybody excited for this? Does this still pique your interest? 2, do you think this is going to have a lasting effect on what DC Comics is going to look like coming into March, right? The month after all this stuff is over. And 3, if it does, if you think it does, or if you think it doesn't, what do you think is going to be happening to the main line of DC Comics moving forward? Boom. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm going to err on the side of optimism here. I think that there's going to be a lot of stinkers. I think I have a fairly good idea, at least on 3 or 4 of them that are really going to be bad. But I think we're going to have some hits. We're going to have some hits that, at a minimum, these characters are interesting enough that even if they're written badly in Future State, other writers will come back and do them better. That's the other advantage. That's the other saving grace. Sometimes you can get a really good character with potential, and that potential might not be realized now, but it'll be in the future. The other thing is that DC needs to introduce more characters. We need fresh blood. Marvel's been introducing so many characters in the last few years. DC is way behind the 8 ball, and it's about time they caught up and we got some interesting characters. So I think that right now there's always a first step, right? And this is it. You have to start somewhere. And I know DC always seems to be playing catch up in the movies and now in the comic books, but you got to do it, and you got to just rip the Band-Aid off sometimes. And I think that's what Future State is. It's ripping the Band-Aid off, letting these characters out, and hoping the hell they find some good writers and artists.
Can I give you a little bit of pushback here? So
Sure.
you're talking about how excited you are for the potential of new fruitful characters, and what we could be doing with them, but hasn't DC kind of just been doing that willy-nilly? I mean, I'll use again James Tynion's Batman run. We've seen like 4, 5, 6 new characters.
That's a good
None
thing.
of them, none of them
No,
have
that's what do you
any
mean?
depth.
James Tynion's Batman run has been absolutely, in terms of introducing new characters, has been excellent. It's created excitement. It's had massive sales between Punchline, between Clown Hunter, between Underbroker, between the designer. All those characters have a great amount of potential moving forward. I will
Okay.
grant you that the storyline ended a little bit with a turd, with a Duke Ex Machina ending that I didn't particularly like. But in terms of the characters themselves, that's what DC wants. And I think there's a lot of potential for the characters.
Sure.
And I even thought that they were well written early on. The first half of the Joker War, I thought was pretty good. It just ended on it didn't end very well. But I think that that's the sign of the times. I love the new characters being introduced, if for no other reason that they can be written even better moving forward. And I think the Future State, if we're getting some new characters, the DC universe needs some new fresh blood. And because my fear is that DC was only going to be focusing on the Trinity and Justice League characters, and they were going to tighten up their publishing line, and we weren't going to get new characters. And while it's nice to know that we are going to be getting new characters, even if they are Batman, Superman, Trinity, Justice League centric, at least they're new. At least we're expanding it a little bit.
Yeah, so this is how I know the rust is off, because I totally disagree with your assessment of Tynion's Batman. I think it is.
Oh, you liked it?
No. I think it was filled with good concepts, and I think that the central premise of, approaching Gotham's rogues gallery as the sort of, the second generation of rogues to come from, the ones that we know and love. I think that's a great idea. However, in execution, every single one of those characters suck and have absolutely no depth to them, and have only been introduced to make royalties, to capitalize on the speculator market, and for plot. The designer was a red herring. Ghostmaker looks like a ripoff of Wrath or Wraith, whatever. The Clown Hunter is just Damian Wayne, but not his son. What am I missing? Punchline? Okay, they're like, hey, Harley does real well. Let's just do other more serious Harley. And I hate sounding reductive, but that's just what she's been. That's literally just been what she is. And none of those characters are contributing to the lore, to the mythos. None of them feel like they are truthfully and organically becoming a threat to Batman, the Bat family, or the DC universe. I just don't care about those characters. And what sucks is a lot of their designs are super cool because Jorge Jimenez is doing a bang up job on those books. But man, I don't give a shit about the spectacle of a new character if they're not going to be contributing to the lore when we have tens, if not hundreds, of other characters that we could have retooled that already exist, and not just not just introduced sort of new, more modern spins that are just reskins of old characters that aren't actually going to contribute to the mythos just for the sake of a new sparkly toy, or for whether or not Tynan is doing it for royalties. I just don't care. I really don't. I would much rather see somebody take an old golden or silver age Batman villain and modernize them. That's what happened to Wrath back in the New 52. John Layman and Jason Fabok's Detective Comics run with Wrath was brilliant. It was brilliant. They took a shoddy silver age DC character at best and made him a competent adverse character to Batman that contributes to the mythos, that becomes something that challenges the core wound of Batman in a really sort of convincing way. And I don't get that from any of these characters. And this is where I get frustrated because I championed Tynan's Batman run before it came out and I was excited for it. And it's just spectacle for the sake of spectacle. And that's what bothers me. Aside from the fact that, like, and I'm not going to get into it now because at some point I'd like to do a review of Joker War and just make an open message to James Tynan about how disappointed I am with his Batman because it lacks craft. It lacks craft. And what bothers me is that when it comes to his independent comic books, he is on his A game. They are excellent. And I don't throw that word around lightly. And the fact that he comes to his favorite character in fiction, my favorite character in fiction, and just burns out like that is a disappointment. You know,
Well,
and
I,
these
I
characters is and the quality of these characters are 100% reflective of that.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to have a debate on Joker War. Like I said, it has its shortcomings as a story. I do, I can't tell you how to feel. I mean, you just the characters didn't hit with you. They didn't hit with you. I think Punchline is an inspired character. I really think there's so much potential for her. I don't think there's another character like Punchline out there, quite frankly. I think that, and I could elaborate. The Coles Notes version is that I like Punchline because she's self-aware enough to know that she's evil. She's not as popular as Harley, but I think that she represents sort of like the darker side of all of us who know how to easily manipulate the mass media through online services, and then turns around and is an evil bitch. And I think it's hard to get a handle on Punchline. You never know what joke she's telling, and I think there's so much potential for her, and I personally love the character, and I think she's only going to get more interesting, and I don't think it's all speculation, but anyways, we can talk more about that.
Sure.
I
But
but
I mean, the one thing I'll say is, I've named 4 characters, and you have a defense for 1. That's a 25%.
I'm not. Well, like I said, we'll talk another time. I think Underbroker's another one that's a fantastic character that was completely underutilized, and his character was insulted in the storyline because he was beaten by a USB port from Catwoman or some stupid thing. So I'm just saying that these are characters that I think that they were underutilized in the storyline, but I think the storyline became bigger than Tynion could handle. But I don't think that takes away from the fact that he created these characters. I think these characters were well thought out enough that their design was great artistically. I think their potential in terms of their power base in Gotham City, I think was relatively well established. I just think that, again, I can't rewrite the story, but there's a lot of potential there, and I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree that you always have to take existing characters and develop them as opposed to creating new ones.
Well,
I really do think that there's something to be said about adding some characters to DC right now, because just as a brand, DC needs to sort of expand a little bit in other forms of mass media, with their DC animated cartoons and everything else. I think the more the merrier, and it's good to see. It's good to see. I don't
see,
mind. I don't mind creators making an extra buck here and there if the characters are good.
yeah, if they're good, that's the big ticket phrase here, man. And I don't think it's always the case that they should go out of the way to revamp a character. But again, if you're just gonna create something that's gonna rehash or not contribute to the mythology, I mean, really, what's designer contributed to the mythology? It was an obvious red herring and a plot device for a lackluster story. Ghostmaker just looks like Wrath but blue. You know what I'm saying? So in those two instances in particular, they're just reskins on characters that we already have. And to be fair, Wrath was already done a service. He's already been made threatening again. He's already, so it feels like we're creating characters for character's sake and not focusing on story and not focusing on, again, how these characters are going to contribute to the mythology. It feels like we're just diluting the brand, and it just, the incentive here doesn't seem to actually be to use them and use what's unique about these characters to drive a story or to drive a narrative or to drive a sort of threat that is unique that they can provide to Batman and to Gotham City. It just feels like spectacle. And sure, somebody could come by later and make these characters interesting, but for now, I don't think I should have to suffer through mediocrity before I get to that point. If you're going to introduce a character, they should have a purpose and it should be, done well. And in regards to Tynion's Batman, we're 13 issues, 14 issues into his Batman. And we've gotten one story.
But in defense, look at X of Swords. It's 22 issues long. Look at the Kree Skull thing that Marvel just started. What was that? 35 issues long. What he accomplished and pulled off in 14 issues is absolutely extraordinary. If you put it in context, both in terms of character creation, speculation, hype, excitement, retailer buzz. I mean, and again, and in spite of all that, he did all that, and it was a mediocre story. But there's no question at the end of the day. But you can't take away from that success. And the first part of the story, people were very excited, and it did work. And the buzz and the creative directions that all those characters can be taken in down the road, that the future potential storylines. I think it's a gold mine of future stories that are just waiting to be told.
But your argument is lynched on comparing mediocrity to mediocrity, and I don't think that works. I don't want somebody else's mediocre to be better than, their competition's mediocrity. I don't care. I just want good stories. And if we're doing it in a shared universe with a continuity, I want those stories to contribute to that vast mythology. Because if you're not there to contribute to the mythology or to the characters or to that landscape, don't tell your story. Just don't. I think that's an integrity thing as a creator. And again, I don't disagree with you about Cross of Swords or whatever the hell it is. I dropped it. I dropped every single X-Men book that I was buying before it even came out. But the thing is, again, I don't think it's fair to say, okay, this is better because we're comparing mediocre to mediocre. No, I think that the real charge that we need to be making is both of these headlining stories and events are mediocre. What are we going to do about that? Why aren't our headlining stories good at the bare minimum? Like baseline good? Because they're not. And again, I know people like Joker War. I know people get really into the spectacle of it all. But looking at it from my perspective as a writer and somebody who wants to tell these stories, I can't help but be frustrated that a lot of these big names can just sit here and turn on their royalty making machines, and people are just going to supplicate to it and buy into it. And I respect your explanation for liking Punchline. And in fact, I think it's definitely made me consider her a little bit more. But when 1 out of the 5 characters has a somewhat valid explanation, you're hitting 20%. You're a 20% success rate, which is not good, because at that point, these worlds and this DC Comics brand have already been diluted enough. What do we need to dilute it some more for? And why do I have to deal with 13 issues of mediocrity on Batman in order for somebody else to later, pick up these characters and do something with them? How about James Tynion just focuses on the story that he has to tell at hand and tell it well, rather than, his main focus being introducing new characters? The focus should be to tell stories. And if introducing new characters is a means to contribute to telling a good story, then you introduce those characters. And to me, this just comes off as sloppy, but this wouldn't be Let's Talk Comics if we didn't get off on a little bit of a tangent. I'll kind of sum up my thoughts on Future State now as well. My first question being, I think it was how am I feeling about DC Future State? The more I talk about it, I become slightly more skeptical, just because it feels like a stopgap. It feels like another Future's End or another Convergence. And then maybe they will, have a couple of Elseworlds non-consequential stories spiral out of this. And I think that, and if I like these stories, I think that is probably the best case scenario in all likelihood. I don't think DC Future State is really going to impact DC Comics, especially because you're not seeing a lot of their playmakers on these books. You're not seeing the people that they have proven to thus far give sort of creative control over the space of DC Comics on any of these books. So it tells me that these books are not going to have that. And it makes me consider that these characters are just kind of gone away for a little bit to focus on whatever they're doing that is going to come next. So I'm going to give some of these books a shot. There's no doubt. Like I said, I mean, just my monkey brain is immediately intrigued by the design language of some of this promo art. And some of these premises do sort of pique my interest. And I do want to give some of these lesser known writers a chance, right? I've been slowly shifting a majority of my pull over to indie comics because I love giving new voices a chance and finding creators that I wouldn't have otherwise found if I was just reading the sort of DC mainline books. But I don't have high hopes for the impact of this story, whether or not it or of this sort of overarching sort of event. Whether or not it ends up being good or bad, I still think the fact that it's going to be so ephemeral is going to be a little bit more of a negative than a positive. But only time will tell. I think come February, it's going to be really interesting for us to sit down and kind of see what DC Future State ends up being, and whether or not this is actually going to bear any consequence on the line moving forward, because I don't think it really will. So yeah, as what I think the future of DC Comics is, I have no clue. I don't have a freaking clue. I only have, those suspicions. I could very well be wrong. So take it with a grain of
Fingers
salt.
crossed.
Yeah, I really hope, and the sad part is I've said this phrase countless times in like the last year and a half. I really hope DC Comics proves me wrong. They haven't yet. They haven't in the last year and a half to 2 years, and that's kind of unfortunate. I just want to be wrong. I do. I don't think you're ever really going to hear me say that very often, but I just want to be wrong. DC proved me wrong. And as we're closing out, I'm just going to go through a couple of these live chats before we bid this night a farewell. Paul Baker says, make no mistake, any good writer at any point in the future can do something interesting or cool with Tynion's royalty check generators. But for now, I'm with you on them, DK. Yeah, it's unfortunate because I really, really wanted to like what Tynion was doing with Batman. And I think I reviewed his first issue pretty well. And it's actually, I think I reviewed the first couple of issues of his Batman fairly well. But there's just, it just feels to me like we're focusing more on creating characters rather than introducing characters that befit the story he wants to tell. And when story is not your primary focus, the craft will depreciate. And I think that is shown throughout the 13 issues of this run. let's see. Tahilum29 says DC needs more world building, even if that world building is in the multiverse. I think that's what Future State is kind of trying to do, though. It is very world building intensive, right? We're taking a lot of what we might know, but elaborating upon it in a couple of different directions. So if Future State turns out to have any bearing on the future, you're going to be getting a hell of a lot of world building, my friend, whether or not you like the world they're building or not. So I don't know. Boom. Do you think DC just needs to continue world building? Do we need to let the past be the past?
To be honest, I would like to see some genuinely new characters. I mean like unaffiliated with the Bat family, the Superman family, or Wonder Woman family. Just a genuine. I'd be up for just a brand new superhero. Period. Like just why not? Just like if they're gonna throw out ideas there and throw different creators and writers and artists, give us some brand new off the wall characters. I mean, and it's like just like I said, we have a multiverse to play with. I've never understood why DC always tries to pigeonhole their stories and worry about continuity. Like, I'm a continuity guy, but you can still tell an out of continuity tale. I don't know why they don't bring back Elseworlds. I don't know why they don't. I don't know why don't they just have Tales of the Multiverse and tell a story on another Earth with a brand new, completely different superhero off the wall. And if he takes, you can always make him mainstream. It's so simple. I mean, I don't know why DC should do that, and I hope they do.
I think I'm reaching for the low hanging fruit here with my answer, but it's just because AT&T DC has known IPs that have brand awareness, and I think that they would rather, and I think Future State sort of contributes to this theory. I think that they would much rather replace the person under the mask than replace the mask. So we're seeing instances where we're getting a new Wonder Woman, a new Batman, a new Superman. Those IPs, just from a business standpoint, are multi-billion-dollar intellectual properties and brands that sell product, that sell books, movies, television, toys, pajamas, you name it. Hell, tattoos on my skin, although DC doesn't make any money off of that. I'm essentially giving them free advertising on my body. So, it is much further in their incentive to just put new characters under these mantles. And while I agree and would love to see some fresh new characters that are interesting and have a purpose, I think at this point, it's also just going to be more well incentivized for DC to make pre-existing brands interesting again, and to revitalize them. And I think from a business standpoint, utilizing that sort of search algorithm, right? Characters that have already existed and that already have some sort of foothold on various search engines to pop up. I think you take those characters, you make them interesting, people search for them, they're going to pop up. They're going to, they're going to appear, and they're going to have that sort of prevalence. So, we'll see. And on one hand, I do agree with you, and I'm ready for something new and fresh. But in another hand, I think financially DC is going to benefit more from just putting new characters in the mantles, even if they do end up setting a sort of course for new characters in the mantles, because for all we know, Future State could just be nothing, and we come back in March and it's Bruce, Clark, and Diana, just leading the charge once again. So we'll see. Paul Baker says, I so wish I agreed with Boom. I've been dying to love Tynan's Batman run since the beginning, even though I had a lot of problems with his detective run. Solo Rebirth. First of all, I'd ask what the fuck is Jeff Johns doing? Nobody knows, and I have a strong feeling that that Jeff Johns is not in love with DC Comics right now.
Well, he's taking a beating. I think he's still working on Stargirl. I think on season 2 of Stargirl, isn't he, or something?
Yeah, and I really do think Jeff Johns is probably feeling pretty disenfranchised after. I can't. Doomsday Clock had to have been an issue with editorial. There's no way, because things were mentioned in that book that were far more concurrent than when he was actually writing that story. So there's no way they didn't make him go back and push things back. And the same with Three Jokers. They're like, I can't help but think that after Jeff Johns lost his executive clout at DC Comics that they didn't kind of punish him a little bit. And in ways, I don't blame him. And obviously, you know, with the sort of controversy surrounding him, I imagine, you know, regarding Ray Fisher, I imagine they probably don't want him in the spotlight right now. So we'll see. I would absolutely love to see Jeff Johns' name on whatever's coming out of Future State. And that's a possibility, right? Like, we haven't seen a number of DC's bigger names on any of these titles. So it is a possibility. Do I expect it? Unfortunately, no, not really. So we'll see. I don't know. What do you thinking about Jeff Johns? Do you think there's a possibility we see him post Future State, or are you feeling more like me? It's a possibility, but not likely.
It's not likely. I don't think I think Jeff Johns, I got a little bit of a bias here because I've been watching a lot of Grace Randolph videos, and she really does not like Jeff Johns. And so I've been listening to a lot of very negative Jeff Johns press lately. So I'm probably, and I love Jeff Johns, but I've been adversely affected. I think my viewpoint, some of the glitter has really come off the Jeff Johns rose here. And it's not looking good for Jeff Johns. I think he's keeping a low profile. I think he's probably staying away from DC. I think Doomsday Clock was, like you said, it was the whole, I don't know. I don't think, I mean, Three Jokers is great, but he finished writing Three Jokers years ago, for God's sakes. It's been Jason Fabok they've been waiting on, and editorial mismanagement getting that crap out. But sorry, it's not crap. It's great. But I mean, it's, I don't see. I think Jeff Johns is gonna stay low, and I see him staying away. I don't think they have any plans on bringing Jeff Johns back.
I unfortunately agree with you. I really do wish Jeff Johns had a place in the future of DC Comics. And what's unfortunate was, you know, whatever talk there was of him and his Killing Zone imprint coming to DC Black Label is totally disintegrated. So, you know, only time will tell. I think we're going to see Jeff Johns take a step away from comics for a couple of years, and we might see him come back. And I actually, before he comes back and does like a longer term series for DC, I actually think there's a bigger chance we see him do something at Marvel at this point, because I can imagine that he's probably highly disenfranchised. I don't see Stargirl as a TV show lasting. I don't think there's that big of an audience for it. I think the fact that it's going to be moving to a CW show, and let's just talk about how longevity in terms of the quality of the storytelling has not been a friend to the CW DC shows. Green Arrow dive bombed and then maybe climbed a couple steps back up the ladder before it fizzled out. The Flash is a train wreck. Supergirl's been boring since day one. I liked Black Lightning season 1. I've yet to see season 2, so I can't speak on it unless I want to come off totally ignorant. But I did like Black Lightning season 1. Legends of Tomorrow, I mean, I watched season 1 and had to force myself through it. It was an absolute mess. Batwoman ended up turning into a train wreck, which is unfortunate because I love Kate Kane. So, although I am excited to actually sit down and watch the first season of Stargirl, the fact that it's going to become a CW syndicated show does not give me high hopes.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think that Jeff Johns' relationship, it all kind of led to this. Jeff Johns' relationship with Warner Brother and DC, I think, is kind of slowly going to be disintegrating. And whenever Stargirl gets taken off the air is going to be the final blow to that relationship. But with all that being said, I want to thank everybody so much for joining us tonight. I know it's been so freaking long since I've been able to do this, and I'm hoping that the next time you see me and my pal Boom sit down for a conversation, I will have hopefully completely shedded the rust that time has granted me.
And I should have a new computer system set up by then too, and I won't, you know, because it's So this whole Gong show, I apologize again, but you know, I promise it's getting worked on, guys.
Before we do close out, I do want to just acknowledge our pal Hawkworld for popping into the chat. He says, "Hi guys, just stepped in to say hey. Concerned about the direction that DC is taking is an understatement, but what can we do? Leave or fasten your seatbelt. Don't forget your air sickness bags." Yeah, honestly, Tim, I think that I am just consciously taking my seatbelt and hovering it above the buckle. And I'm just waiting for the moment that I have to just jam that thing in with all my might and get to the point where it is just locked in there. And no matter how many times I repress that button, that seatbelt is not coming back out. You know, I started this cautiously optimistic. Now I'm just kind of cautious, and I'm going to give it a chance. But I can see why you'd feel that way, man. And if you guys want to check out a cool, very, very Hawkman intensive comic book community, follow Hawk World on pretty much any social media under the name Hawk World. He has an awesome website as well that'll detail anything you might possibly want to know about the character or his mythology. Great guy, really passionate about Hawkman. So if you guys have any questions or information you'd like to learn about the character, Tim is your guy. With that being said, make sure you guys like this video if you enjoyed the conversation and want to see more like this. If this video does fairly well, we will definitely know to sit down come maybe late January, early February, once we've received news as to what the aftermath of Future State is going to be, or whether or not it even has an aftermath, and whatever comes next is going to be totally independent of that. So like this video, share it with your friends. Obviously, subscribe to Comic Boom. Link in the description below. One of the most unique comic book reviewers on the internet. There's a reason that anytime I actually take time to come out here and just yell at people about comic books, he's the guy I like to yell at the most, or yell with. So Boom, I know you've been busy with work and everything, but do you have any videos coming out that the people at home can expect?
Well, I'm gonna try to put I'm gonna review about 5 or 6 death metal comics all in one, because it's one great big pile of
Mess.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have a little fun with that. And I'm going to review 2 Wonder Woman comics in a row. Tamaki's Wonder Woman run is so comical that it's going to be more of a rant, but I'll have fun with that. So that'll come out probably in the next few days. And hopefully be booted up with a new computer system. So fingers crossed, things will change over the next few weeks here.
Big fingers crossed. If you guys want to hang around my channel as well, you can click that big bad subscribe button down below. I'm hoping to do a sort of in-depth Joker War review. I don't expect that bad boy to be less than like 30 minutes long. So if you're ready for something big, bad, and honestly, I think this review will be like my most nitpicky. I think I'm going to go into this literally with an editorial letter and pick apart why I don't like the run or the story, because I know that some people really did like it, and a lot of people are kind of giving me a furrowed brow when I say that this is mediocre. So I want to thoroughly explain my thoughts in depth and give you all of the evidence. So stick around for that. I'm really hoping to come back with a little bit more consistency as I was able to do a couple of months ago. It's just, you know, the Kickstarter for the comic book and everything, and obviously trying to get ahead on the comic has been a process along with work and school. But I would like at bare minimum to do these live streams weekly again, and maybe come out with a review maybe once every 2 weeks, just being reasonable, maybe even 3 weeks. So keep an eye out for that. If you like in-depth comic book discussions and editorial level analysis and critiques, stay with us. And if you haven't already, feel free to use the link in the description below to my channel's merch site, DarkKnightNation.com/shop. Even though the Kickstarter for my comic book is over, I have actually put out an option for you to pre-order a copy of this first print book. It is going to be slightly more expensive than it would have been for the Kickstarter, and it will not be signed like it was for the Kickstarter, because I just, as somebody providing a product, would like to make sure that the incentives to those who contributed to my vision early on are rewarded in kind. And for all of you that have actually contributed to the Kickstarter, I want to look you in the eye through this camera and say thank you. I deeply, deeply appreciate the support. I appreciate your faith in me as a storyteller, as an up and coming storyteller, and I can promise you that that it will be well rewarded. From the art to the writing, I put a lot into this book, and honestly, from issue to issue, just from me sort of editing my own stuff, I have noticed an increase in quality over time. So again, I just want to thank you. If you guys are interested in picking up a copy, again, link in the description. You can go pre-order a copy for yourself. Like I said, it will not be incentivized in the same way the Kickstarter was, but I can promise you a damn good comic book, 24 pages of actual story with no ads, premium quality stock, and some premium quality storytelling. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. And this is the dynamic duo bidding you a farewell on this episode of Let's Talk Comics. Have a good night, guys.
Take care.